This exercise is from Giesecke, Technical Drafting, 15th edition, Chapter 6, Exercise 6.5-4. On this problem, I'm going to hit the space bar and then I'm going to select from the right side view. So I'm going to start out looking from the right side view, and I'll come over onto the right side plane, and I'll right click and select create a new sketch. I'm then going to draw a corner rectangle, and I'll start that corner rectangle at the origin, and I'm going to come down to the right about like that. Now, one thing that I recommend doing is always create one circle or one rectangle or one line and dimension it immediately before continuing. This will give you a sense of scale for the rest of your sketch. And so I'm going to dimension the width of this rectangle as 30, and I'll dimension the height of it as 35. I'm then going to draw a second rectangle, and I'm going to do that rectangle from about right here over to about right there. Now, I could have drawn that as 3 separate lines, but that's more clicks. A rectangle is just 2 clicks. Click here, and I have finished that rectangle. I will then dimension the distance from here to here, a distance of 10. I'll do the same thing down here, from here up to here, a distance of 10. And I'll dimension from here to here, a distance of 10. All of the geometry turns black, letting me know that it is all fully defined, fully constrained. And down here in the right hand corner, it also tells me that the geometry is fully constrained. I'm going to finish sketch, and I'm going to rotate around a little bit to an isometric view, and I'm going to go to the Features tab, and I'll do Extrude. And I need to select the area that I want to extrude, so I'm going to select this sketch. And because I have multiple closed profiles here, I need to tell SolidWorks which area I want to extrude. So I'm going to come down here where it says Selected Contours. I'm going to delete the automatic selection, and then I can pick this area or this area. I want to extrude this contour, and I'll put in the distance of 35. Or actually, for this one, let's do that distance of 70. And I'll say OK to that. Okay, so I have some material started. I'll save my file, and then I'm going to hit the space bar and go around to the front view. So I want to do some sketching on this front view, but let's go back to an isometric view here for a minute, and let's come over here and look. So the front plane is on the front of my object, the top plane is on the top of the object, and the right side plane actually over here on my left, or if you're looking at it from the right. So I could do a sketch on this face of the part, or I could do it on the front plane. Whenever possible, it's better to do the sketch on one of these origin planes rather than do it on a part face. And we'll see that later on when we get into more complex geometry. When we go to edit the geometry, it's a more robust technique if we sketch on these origin planes. So I'm going to start a new sketch, right click, start a new sketch on the front plane. Let's hit the space bar and go around looking at it from the front plane. And then I'm going to draw a line. I want to draw a line, so I'll hesitate on this edge. I want it to be connected to that edge. I'm going to come down here below this edge, and I'm going to have it automatically put a vertical relation as I go. So you see that it's putting that vertical relation. I'm going to go over horizontally, and then I'm going to come down. I want to snap to this line, so I'll click on that line. I'm going to come over to this corner, and I'm going to come up to this corner, and let's say I'm going to miss that corner, intentionally. So I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to come back to that location and exit out. Now whenever you don't see something, or you have something that's unexpected, try dragging the geometry. I can drag that endpoint. I see that it's not connected down here. Over here on this end though, it is connected, but I can drag it this way. So I want this actually connected to that corner, so I'll drag that back down, and it snaps to that corner, and that line turns black. I am then going to dimension the distance from here over to this line. That distance is 20. And I'm going to dimension the distance from here over to this line. That distance is 40. And make sure you put in the dimension, because it previewed like it was going to be 40, but notice it's 40.3 da 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 da. So I'm going to put in 40. I want that to be exactly 40. And I want the distance from here to here. I want that distance to be 15. Alright, let's hit the space bar, and I'm going to go back around to an isometric view so we see that I have created that profile. I'll finish sketch, and notice this sketch is still highlighted. So if I go to the extrusion, it's automatically going to pick up that sketch. If I don't have that highlighted and I do extrude, then I have to select that sketch. So I'll select that sketch. I want to actually do an extrude cut, so I'm going to cancel out of this. I'll pre-highlight that sketch, and I'll do an extrude cut. And I'm going to tell it I want to go all the way through the part, so no matter how I change that part, it will always go all the way through the part. And so there we see our geometry. Now I want to cut 3 holes in here, and again I could start a sketch on this part face, and I want 2 holes going through this face and then a hole going through this face, or I could do my sketch on the top plane, and I prefer to use the origin plane, so I'm going to start a new sketch on that top plane. I'll hit the space bar, and I'll go around to the top plane, and so I'm going to draw a circle about right here, and I want to track over from the center of this circle and put another circle over here. And I want to make sure that no matter what I do, those 2 circles stay lined up. So I'm going to put a construction line, and so I'll click on this down arrow and I'll select center line or construction line. I want to put a construction line between the centers of those 2 holes. That will keep those holes lined up. I'm going to dimension the diameter of one of these holes as 10. I'll dimension the distance between centers as 20. And I will dimension the distance from this hole over to this edge, a distance of 10. And then I want to locate that hole from this edge up. I'm going to locate that up a distance of 15. Now notice that this circle has turned black. The location of that hole is fully defined. If I drag this circle, I see that the size of that circle isn't defined. I want it to be equal to this one, so if I change this dimension, this one will change as well. So I'm going to hold down the control key, and I'm going to select both of those circles, and I'll put an equal relation on those 2 circles. And let's rotate around a little bit so we can see what we have. I'm going to finish my sketch, and I'll do extrude. And I actually want to do an extrude cut, so let's cancel out of that. Let's do extrude cut, and I'm going to tell it to go through all. Did something right, save it. Now there should be one more hole up here. I'm going to leave that hole for you to figure out how to put that hole in. Let me know if you have any trouble. And let's go ahead and do a drawing, 2D drawing. So I've gone over to the drawing environment, and I need to place a view. So I'll go to the view layout, and I'm going to come up here to model view. You can also come over here to your view palette, and I'll do it from the model view this time. So I'm going to do model view, and I'm going to do exercise 4, and I'm going to put in a view at 1:1 scale. And so let's click here to place that front view, the top view, the right side, and I'll place an isometric view and accept those. Alright, I want to move this isometric view over so you can grab the boundary of the view and move it around. I want to put in some center lines for the holes, and so I'll go to the annotation tab and I'll do a center line. I can select this view and tell it to automatically put in the center lines, or I can manually put in those center lines myself. So I'm going to accept that. Now I might want to shorten up these center lines a little bit, so if I grab these handles on the end of that center line, I could shorten that up, and later on we'll look into options to see how we can set that overshoot to be more appropriate, so that we don't have to make these changes. But for now, I'll manually drag those center lines, make them look more aesthetically pleasing. I'll then put some dimensions on here, so I'll do smart dimension, and I'm going to dimension this overall width as 70, this distance as 20, and I will dimension the distance from here to here, and that's 20. I'll dimension the distance from here to here, and it's 35, and from here to here as 10, and from here to here as 10. Now I don't need the distance from here to here. If I subtract the 10 and 10 from the 35, that will give me the distance that's there. I'll dimension the distance from here to here, that is also 10. I'll dimension the diameter of one of these holes. Remember, you still have another hole that you need to put in over here. I'll dimension the distance between centers of those holes as 20, and I'll dimension the distance from this hole over to this edge as 10, and then from this edge up to the hole as 15. And let's look around and see what we have. Make sure that I have all my dimensions. If I miss any dimensions, let me know. So I need a dimension from here over to here of 40. Now later on we'll discuss some selection of datums. I may wish for all of these dimensions to come from a single datum or from a certain datum, and we will discuss that later on. Now, I might want to remove that gap in between here, so I'm going to drag this up, and now I don't have that gap. I'm going to do it over here, the same thing, and I'll do the same thing over here. So to the ANSI ASME standards, and so that completes our second problem. You still have to put a hole in here and dimension the location of this hole.